Alrighty, Multiversus. It's finally out. Version 1.0 has launched. For those who don't remember, this game was sort of in early access / open beta mode from July of 2022 to June of 2023. The game then went offline to prepare for what eventually became a May 28th, 2024 full release and official launch. And so far, how's that going? Well, recall that Multiversus, prior to its final launch, it did see a big peak, but then those player numbers dwindled quite a bit. This is what player numbers looked like back in February of 2023. The game fell off quite hard, but it did peak at a rather high number of concurrent players once upon a time. And so the question now remains, will Multiversus, with its final launch, be able to retain its player base rather than losing more than 99% of its player base post-launch? I think to achieve that, they will really have to improve on what was in the beta in terms of features and gameplay and aspects that people had problems with. As for how it's looking right now, well, it's still the launch period, and the game has peaked at over 100,000 players, 114,000, which is not bad for a re-release, and it's still drawing in tens of thousands of players. Whether that will last, though, we'll see over the next couple of days. But when it comes to reception from players, I'd say that there's mixed feedback surrounding the game right now. In fact, if you look at recent reviews of the game on Steam, it is currently sitting at a mixed score of 61%. The overall reviews are leaning towards the positive side, while people are having fun, and there's certainly always going to be a really cool novelty to seeing frickin' Super Shaggy battling it out with Superman and Warner Brothers properties in a fighting game in this shared universe. People are still going to scrutinize the features, modes, gameplay, and monetization of this free-to-play Super Smash Brothers-like, and there are plenty of complaints right now that people are putting out there. In fact, many seem to have the impression that this game was more feature complete and in some respects better in the beta than it is in the final release, which is why if you go to the Multiversus subreddit, for example, you'll find plenty of top comments that are complaining about how certain changes feel like a step back from the beta, and the expectation from a final launch is that it'll be better than the beta. So here's one particular Reddit post that's highlighting some of the areas where this game in the final release feels like a regression. So right here, there is a gameplay section that bullet points how there's no more grounded neutral air. The camera zooms in far too often. There's no leaderboards now. No after-battle report, aka damage done and ring outs. You can't see who accepted / declined a rematch. When it comes to modes, they've actually removed certain features. There's no more co-op gameplay versus AI. There's no offline play anymore, and there's no free-for-all mode with items. Then there's training mode, which once upon a time allowed you to play as characters you haven't unlocked and paid for, so you could test them out before deciding whether it's a character you want to pursue and unlock or prioritize. Now you can no longer play as characters you don't own in local play and training. You can't change your controller settings in the training room anymore, which seems like a convenient feature that you wouldn't want to remove. More full loading screens when changing settings / start positions. No advanced tutorial mode. And then when it comes to the economy / progression and the monetization, no more cheaper characters. So every character now is 3,000 to 6,000 premium currency, whereas before you see prices are closer to like 1,500. No non-glemium skins. No more battle pass XP after every match. We can only level up the battle pass from challenges now. So the way you progress and the way you unlock stuff through gameplay has been nerfed and made worse in the final release, which seems like a very corporate thing to do so that they can incentivize people to spend more rather than play more. No toast back if someone toasts you after you've left the post-match screen. You have to use your character tickets if you got them, presumably also battle pass tickets. You can't choose to pay character currency or glemium. And even in an area like settings, it feels like there are features that have been removed, conveniences that have been backtracked on for no good reason. No option to remove team colors in battle. No ability to swap neutral and side attacks. Can't remove or lower buffering of inputs. Can't change the game's language in the settings. So many are like, what the heck? Why have they excluded all of these elements in the final release? Stuff that people enjoyed. during the beta, stuff that people found convenient. And when it comes to monetization, it just feels like a worse version of what was there before, like a greedier version of it. Another top post just straight up says that the beta was in a better state, highlighting some of the areas where it feels like the game has regressed. Here's another top post saying that, am I crazy, or did they spend a year and end up removing more features than they added? There's also the sense that the gameplay and feel of this fighting game hasn't been improved a whole lot. This game, while it is a Super Smash Bros.-like, it certainly lacks the polish and the responsiveness and just the feel that Super Smash Bros. Has. This is a formula that, Masahiro Sakurai and the team have been working on and mastering for many, many years, and they, really got it down with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This game tries to replicate that, but it still feels certainly in many ways inferior compared to the feeling that Super Smash Bros. Accomplishes with just the weightiness of characters and hits and just how it feels like to move characters around and how it feels like to fight. Super Smash Bros. Just has that down in a way that I feel like no other game of this genre does. Multiversus feels like a jankier version of Super Smash Bros. In a lot of ways, and people were hoping that within the year that they had since the beta closed, that they would reach something closer to the polish of Super Smash Bros. When it comes to the overall feel of the game. But many feel like that just doesn't feel like the case. Here's one more top post in the Multiversus subreddit sharing similar sentiments, stating this feels more like a beta than the actual beta, highlighting exactly the same things that that bullet list did when it comes to features that they missed, that they feel shouldn't have been removed, where it just feels like it doesn't make sense for that stuff to not be there in the final release when it was in the beta. There are entire posts dedicated to specific removed features, like the fact that you no longer can play as characters you don't own in local play and training, which just feels kind of scummy, and it feels like it's meant to incentivize people to spend money. It just feels kind of petty and stingy to not let people try out a character in a mode that has absolutely no influence when it comes to competing with other players. Like, training is a very isolated thing. At the very least, let people try out what they might be buying or grinding for, especially when they're so expensive or when they require such a significant amount of grind. And then a major aspect of a Super Smash Bros. Style game is the couch co-op experience. It's the communal aspect of getting people together and being able to play with them offline, but a lot of people feel like with the way they regress on that front with the final release, they essentially killed the offline scene by removing the complete offline roster. Super Smash Bros. Is often seen as almost like a party game that can be very competitive, but encourages people to actually gather physically, and the fact that Multiversus has kind of essentially killed that aspect of this game just isn't ideal for a game of this genre, this type of fighting game specifically. Even character portraits feel like a regression. Once upon a time, Multiversus had these 2D portraits that were gorgeous to look at, and now with this generic 3D model kind of character portrait situation going on here, they just look so much more generic than they did before. A lot of people miss what they did here and wish that they had retained this aspect. Others are baffled by some of the types of challenges that they introduced this game, and now challenges are the only way to progress through the battle pass and whatnot. One of the challenges that people don't like is a requirement for you to bring another player with you into battle, which is harder to do now because they essentially removed offline play and couch co-op and couch play. So this just makes it not particularly ideal situation for those who maybe just don't have the capability to bring other players into battle. Maybe they just don't have other players who play this game, and so for those people, they're essentially locked off from completing this particular challenge. Others are begging that the developers implement the progression system that the beta had, where you can just level up the battle pass by playing instead of having to complete these challenges. A lot of people feel like this is just a less satisfactory version of the progression system that was there in the beta, and this is very much an element that we have seen other free-to-play games try to implement. I think Halo Infinite, if I recall, had a system where progression was done solely through challenges, and that didn't go well. So for Multiversus to implement something similar just feels very short-sighted. And then there are entire threads dedicating to discussing the monetization and progression system of the game, just how costly it is to unlock characters and content in this game, or how much grind and time it would actually take to unlock stuff in this game. You can kind of read this post for yourself. I link it in the description below if you want to do a deep dive. But yeah, it is this whole basically essay trying to explain exactly how this complicated monetization system works, and just the actual math that details just how much worse the progression and monetization in this game is, where it just feels like they're kind of trying to strong arm you into making purchases and kind of punishing those who stick with the free aspect of this free-to-play game. And look, I get that this is free-to-play and the game has to make money somehow, but there is a balance to be struck with monetization where the game doesn't feel completely unviable or completely insufferable to those who decide to engage with the game without spending money. And then there's stuff like this where characters don't feel particularly balanced. Shaq, for example, I mean, look at the kind of insanity and the kind of stun locking you can pull off with rather relative ease. I mean, look at this. Just like that, this character is just completely disabled because of essentially an exploit that makes this character invincible in 1v1 if you manage to, you know, pull off the right combination of moves that allows you to literally just kill a character off with no effort, just automatically have him take all the damage in the world. And you can see at the end here that by the end they have, 1,400 damage before they're just blown off while this guy's just standing still. So yeah, there's a lot of kinks to work out with this game if it intends to be a Smash Brothers competitor or even a Brawlhalla competitor. That's kind of a Super Smash Brothers, like, that's free to play, that's from Ubisoft. It's kind of taken off and it's still going decently. If Multiversus doesn't wish to fall off like it did during the beta, where numbers again dipped into, over 99% of the player base deciding to not engage with this game anymore, it needs to make a lot of changes. It needs to make improvements. It needs to add features that people enjoyed from the beta. The monetization and progression system needs to feel more satisfactory and less scummy, and maybe more in line with what the beta did. They need to, weirdly enough, with the final release, do more things that the beta did, which isn't what you'd want from a 1.0 final release. We'll see if the developers listen to the feedback and over time improve the game and make this a viable long-term live service Super Smash Brothers like, because the concept of this game, having Warner Brothers characters and properties clash in this crossover, that's very enticing. And so a lot of people want this game to thrive, but I feel like Warner Brothers greed, as always, is the thing getting in the way. And if Warner Brothers can't see the forest for the trees and think long term, then they may very well kill off this game before it has the chance to reach its full potential. And then beyond that, the developers do have to make improvements when it comes to gameplay and features, and really polish this thing up, because the potential is there, and the concept is primed to thrive, but only if they do right by the game and the customers and the potential that this title has. Or at the very least, that's one man's take on what you need to know about some of the complaints regarding Multiversus and its kind of mixed reception release. There are things people like about it for sure, and there is fun to be had, but it's certainly far from being perfect. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Multiversus and its current state, and if you've played it, what you think about it so far, and where you feel like this game could improve. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.